Standing up in McKinney. This is According to Callus. It is April the 1st, the year of our Lord 2025. It is episode 734. And it is April Fool's Day. However, what I have to say today is not a laughing matter. In other words, no jokes today. Not sure why that happened this way, but that's where we are at. I think that I wouldn't be doing anybody any favors. I suspect that the 20 or 30 downloads that I'm going to receive off of this that I know about will appreciate what I have to say today. We're working on what's next. So, before we get into it, before I go any further, let me just say that the podcast has been a lot of fun. It's not going to go away, but it is going to change. It just has to. Life changes. That being said, the goal is still to grow it. We still need people to join us. There are well over 700 episodes that are already done in the can, if you will, and they'll be there as long as possible. What's going to change is unknown at the moment. Not sure exactly how this is going to play out. So, again, it matters if you like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. Why? Because no matter what the changes are, it's not going to go away. It still serves as a beacon. It's still going to be a reoccurring thing. It's still what they would call evergreen, right? So if you join me, like, share, subscribe, do what you need to do. And if you're feeling particularly froggy, I would say do me a solid. Rate, review the program. But more importantly, join me on the social medias of your choice. Now, I know people hate on Facebook, and I guess to some degree, rightfully so. I know there's, some people that love and hate Gab. There's some people that know me, we exists. And I know there's, love and hate for X as well as YouTube. But those are the places I'm currently at. Why does this matter? Well, because the voice still needs to be heard. The message is still needing to be passed around. It will stand sometime. I mean, even if you were to listen to an episode a day, every day of the week, it would take you about 2 years to get through all of them. And most of what I talk about is still directly relevant. And what does that look like going forward? I don't know. Again, no joke. It just so happened that today was the day. Normally today would be a Texas Tuesday or a Texit Tuesday, if you will. Those are still very near and dear to my heart. And some of what I'm going to say today does directly relate to that. But I needed to take a pause today. Today's episode is a pause. And the reason why I'm doing it is because 2024 was an extremely difficult year in many, many ways. Oh, yes, we had the big win, politically speaking. And if that's all that mattered, yeah, it was a solid success. But there's so many other things that played out. And I think that a lot of the things get missed by those folks, myself included, that are politically inclined. Most of those have come to resolution in the last 3 months. Most of those issues, those concerns, if you will. And I'm very grateful for that. But in our church, the theme of the year is pause, right? Basically, you can do so much and you can be involved in so many things that you become ineffective. You are not having an outcome that you desired or preferred. You're limiting your own ability by not taking a pause. That's just the simplest explanation. Well, coincidentally, I finished reading through Ecclesiastes about a week or two ago. And I'm always struck by Ecclesiastes 3 and the song from my childhood that really actually predates me, but it is a common song from my childhood. And basically, Turn, 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 is based off of Ecclesiastes 3, talking about a time for everything. And when I'm looking at what's gone on, well, certainly since 2019, there's been a lot of changes, a lot of growth, a lot of, different directions and outcomes that weren't necessarily predicted, preferred. But I must say, approaching 6 years ago, different time, different place. My wife and I have lost friends, acquaintances. We had our lockdown period in Texas and actually the whole world. We're still not over that. There are so many things that have occurred. It's an entirely different world. And I've done my best to stay objective. I've done my best to stay on task, on point, on mission, if you will. But a lot of that has to change. One, because of the idea of a pause, but less necessarily the pause, and then the idea that there's a time for everything. So if you'll humor me, I've found a copy of the Geneva Bible online, and I've heard over time that it's a little different than the old King James, which is certainly what I grew up with, and big fan of the CSB, which is the Christian Standard Bible from Holman, but I always recall a conversation I had with a guy by the name of Eric way back in high school, and he told the joke of, what's the best version of the Bible? Because kind of the whole King James thing was an issue back then. Oh, well, we need the best version. And his answer, and again, it's kind of a joke, so I guess technically this is a joke for April Fools, but he said the red one. The one that's actually red is the best Bible. So, fast forward 35 years, and as I spend time going through on my own, I can't help but think that was a very appropriate way to phrase it. Okay, so now that I've stumbled upon the Geneva Bible from time to time, my understanding is there's some differences. So I am curious because I had just read through chapter 3 a week or two ago in the CSB. Well, let's just kick it over to Geneva Bible and see what's what. All right, so to all things there is an appointed time, and a time to every purpose under heaven. Now, notwithstanding the unique spelling and certainly the dated phraseology, I'm going to figure it out. We'll go do this together. Okay. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to slay, a time to heal, a time to break down, and a time to build, a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace, and a time to be far from embracing, a time to seek, a time to lose, a time to keep, and a time to cast away, a time to, I'm going to guess that's reap. No, it's tear, or ret. There we go. It's a time to ret, a time to sow. And I think they're referring to a time to tear and a time to sow. Ret being the same as tear. a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. What profit hath he worketh of ye thing wherein he travelleth? I have seen the travail that God hath given to the sons of men, and humble them thereby. He hath made everything beautiful in his time. He hath set the world in their heart. Yet a man cannot find out the work that God hath wrought from beginning even to the end. So, I'm going to stop there. That was through verse 11. Almost a little bit of a tongue twister there. So, one of the things that they're not sure, gather stones, what the actual reference is there. I've always looked at it as a corollary to a time to build, right? You're gathering the stones for a purpose. It could be you're just gathering up the ammunition, which would also go away with War and Peace, right? So we talked about that in poetry, these are couplets of opposites. We talked about laying this 7 things out, the 7 opposites. So I think for the purpose of today's episode, we're going to talk about a time to mourn, a time to build, and a time for war. And that doesn't mean that the other 11 items aren't relevant. It doesn't mean that the other 11 items don't come into play here. It's just these are the 3 specific things I want to focus on for the rest of today's episode. Okay. So when I think of a time to mourn, in certain respects, I've mourned for my country for quite some time. I mean, I did take an oath to support, defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, back in 1991. There's no expiration date on that. And I've watched what's played out. And to be fair, every president in my lifetime has violated the Constitution. Every congressional session in my lifetime has been in gross violation of the Constitution. In fact, the vast majority of the judges that make their opinions, or rulings if you prefer, they are opinions, but nevertheless, violate my understanding of the Constitution. I mean, granted, the judge is supposed to allegedly have the right and the wisdom to determine that which is constitutional, but it seems to me that they usually convolute and make stuff up in order to claim something is constitutional. That being said, there are some really good ones and do a really good job. We do have some fantastic congressmen still. Well, at least 2. And we have got a handful of senators, which I think are fantastic. I'll allow for some dispensation to our current president. Far from perfect. But why do I bring this up? Because it's only when you mourn something, that you admit that something's lost, that you can take the next logical step. Come to peace with the situation and find out what's next or what replaces it. Now, I think I'm gonna include this point here, and I don't know if it's the best fit here or later, but I think it's important because it does relate to the idea that you're mourning. So I listened to Matt Shea's show, former Washington State Senator, and I would say that more often than not, he and I are on the same page, philosophically and politically. Sometimes I think his soft spot for Ukraine, or perhaps his angst over Russia, clouds his judgment otherwise. But overlooking that, in foreign affairs, we're in different chapters of the book, clearly. But he was interviewing a CIA person. I want to say it was Laura. It doesn't really matter. It came out on March the 27th, and he was talking about the Epstein files. But But one of the things that I found remarkable, and to be fair, neither one of these people would be labeled neocons, at least in my book. Neither one of these people are advocates for war all the time. That's not what I'm driving at here. But what I think is most interesting is while she was referencing the Treaty of Westphalia, which followed the 30-Year War, which is what kind of created the idea of a nation state, she then was talking about how Russia, or the old Soviet Union, forcibly collected other smaller nations to become part of the whole, part of the Union. And her analysis was that they're doing something similar again. They're forcing nations to come back together. Their union, if you will. They're creating a union of states under force. They're rejoining them by force. Now, when I was listening to this, I couldn't help but think of myself, is this person not familiar with our own history? Now, and to be true to form, she referenced Russia, even modern current Russia, is an empire, as is China. In other words, there's other parts of the country that were forcibly joined to the whole. And again, empire, other groups forcibly joined to become part of the whole. And I seem to recall Matt Shea's position on the War of Southern Separation, right? The War of Northern Aggression, the war between the states, the Civil War, the War of Southern Succession. I seem to recall him being very much in the Lincoln nationalist mindset. And if I'm getting that wrong, and again, I'm not looking to throw shade on Matt Shea, because again, most of the time we're on the same page, or at least in the same chapter. But foreign affairs is someplace where we kind of deviate. And the person he's interviewing laid down this passionate argument about why these countries that had separated should not be forced to be made part of the Union. And that they're empires reconstituting themselves. And I'm curious if they've considered how that plays in with what went on from 1861 till 1865. And if they see the irony in making that argument. Now, I know it's now 2025 and a lot of time's passed since then. And indeed, there's probably nobody's got a grandparent probably at this point that was around for that. So I'm not looking to open old wounds. I'm not looking to relive and relitigate what happened there. But I just found a certain amount of irony in that. And indeed, some of these same folks pitch a fit when there are succession movements, or secession, I should say, secession movements within our country right here and right now. My own state of Texas has a nationalist movement, of which I'm a member of, proud to be a member. I think they bring up a lot of valid points, and I think that people should be heard. Should Texas go its own way, or is Texas really better off staying within the Union? I think these are good arguments to be had. I think it's worth everybody's time. I tend to think that Texas overall would be better on its own. I could be swayed, but nobody's kind of really stepped up to that. Likewise, I can make a very good argument that the entire country would be better off if California went off on its own, or even a section of California went off on its own. I can make good, valid arguments why a chunk of Oregon should separate from the rest of Oregon, or why Washington should be two different states, or why Washington or pieces of Washington and or Oregon should join with Idaho. I can make all those arguments. I could probably make a very valid argument why Northeast Illinois should be its own state. You could probably say the same of lopping off the southeastern tip of New York State and let the rest of New York State go its own way. And the reason why these don't get any traction is because that would require people, vested interests, giving up power and control that they currently have. And they're not interested in doing that. They don't want to listen. They're not really interested in anything, only the thing that keeps them in power. But that's, again, not really the topic for today, and it's, I guess, potentially slightly off topic. But again, when you're talking about mourning, you have to come to grips with these are things that, quite frankly, we might need to give up. We might need to be willing to accept that they don't ever happen. But along with that, we need to also be honest with ourselves and acknowledge that our nation doesn't exist in the former form. That our nation is no longer a republic. That our nation no longer functions the way it was designed. We have to come to grips with that. We can mourn it. And because we are able to mourn it, because we take the time to grieve the loss, we can move on to replacing, rebuilding. Okay? So mourning can encapsulate dealing with the fact that you've lost your friends, you've lost your relatives, acquaintances, whatever. And sometimes they're good patriots, sometimes they're just good family friends. And you need to be willing to acknowledge they had a good life, they did the things they did, and they've hopefully went on to meet their maker and are going to get to hear the words, "Well done, good and faithful servant." But I don't know that any more than you know that. I mean, we see the fields, and you can tell what they've sown and what's to a degree been reaped, but you don't know for sure. You can't possibly know another man's heart, unless, of course, they're telling you flat out something different. But even then, you'll never know 100%. All right. I think I've covered that. It's mourning. Nobody wants to be in a period of mourning forever, but it is important that we're able to do it and accept it. Grieve the loss and be prepared for what's next. So a time to build, right? That's the second one I'm focusing on. Now, you can say this is gathering stones, or you could say this is just building. And I think in either case, they're in there. Ecclesiastes 3, the first 11 verses, make it clear that there's a time to build things up. Well, I would tell you that we're there right now. And I'm there right now. And that's part of what I was stating at the beginning. We have to pivot and build for what's new, what's next. We have to be prepared. And that takes time, it takes energy and focus. So how do you build? What are you building? That's different for all of us. I'm going to rebuild a career, right? I'm going to, at some point, build a new house. I'm going to look at securing, aka building an alternative future for our country, for our state, for our county. Your mind needs to focus on what is the thing that you think you can most recently or best affect and start building towards that. And it's going to be different for all of us. But if you're not building something, I mean, does it mean you're tearing it down? Maybe. What are you building? What do you want to build? What would you like to see the fruits of your labor bring about? But again, you can't think about what you want to build if you're not taking the time to acknowledge that you're ready for what's next. So I think to myself, I've spent a couple of years building this podcast, building the groups associated with the podcast, building the audience, building the interaction. And I think to myself, do I want to give this up? Do I want to cast it asunder? Do I want to, go all in and try and make a living off of this? Do I want to build something up in its place? The answer is, don't really know yet. The answer is, take some time, pause. Now, that those of you that know me IRL, right, in real life, you're well aware of the challenges and setbacks and things going on in my life for the last year. It's not been easy, but we're through the bulk of it. We're I would like to say on the other side, but that's not exactly true, and that's not exactly what I'm driving at. We're now at a time to build. So I'm going to be building. The question is, what's the priority? What's the thing that gets the most return on the investment of time? Therein lies the rub. Because if you're building one thing, you may need to take your focus off of other things that you were working on. What does that look like? Who's involved? Who helps you? Who do you need to maybe sideline? Don't know. But we'll get there eventually, right? We'll figure it out. So I'm going to short that because there's really nothing more to say about that. I think we're currently in a time to build, and I'm building. What are you doing? Right? All right. Last thing. Item number 3. A time for war. Now, this can be metaphorical. This can be physical, spiritual. But I know it's coming. What does it look like? When does it happen? What is my involvement, if any? I don't know. I don't think anybody really truly knows. I mean, I guess if you're still wearing the country's uniform, you could certainly be worried about things going kinetic. I think there's some possibility that's happening, or that could happen. I'd like to believe that we've got another 3.5 years of relative peace. I mean, I don't think Donald Trump, for all of his quote-unquote bellicose speaking, is going to start a war. He's made it quite clear he's the peace guy. He's made it quite clear that he doesn't want people dying. He wants to end these things. I choose to take him at his word. I choose to accept that negotiation is his strong suit. So when I see him doing some things he's doing, and it's like, it's negotiation. I get it. But the time for war, I mean, you could be talking about our soul, our individual soul, the soul of our country. I would tell you that we should already be at war for the soul of our country, in my opinion. We've stood by for far too long and watched it be eaten away, destroyed by this civic cancer that exists. I think we need to be prepared to understand that our opponents are already at war. They're already destroying what matters most. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Now, I know that John Guandolo and a few other people have talked about the red-green axis. They've talked about the enemies from within and the enemies from without. Matt Bracken has written a number of books kind of talking about the issues both within and from without. And honestly, those guys both know infinitely more about these issues than I do. I would clearly recommend them as a reference. But when you're preparing for war, you have to build, and you have to be prepared beforehand physically. You have to prepare yourself mentally as well. You have to know the tactics. You have to understand what's at play and what actions are being taken that precede the war. When your enemy is looking to take over a section of property around you or adjacent to you and plant their flag, that should be a warning call. When a hostile power seeks to undermine you, both publicly and privately, that's a warning shot. You ought to be paying attention. Now, maybe it'll never go kinetic. One would hope. But if it stays less than, right, that whole low-key under the radar battles going on, it's much harder to defend against. I will caution people out there. If you doubt me, look to Europe. If you see what's playing out in Europe right now, that's us. It's only a matter of time. If you see what's happening in Canada, That's us. Maybe sooner rather than later. Their leaders have routinely sold them out. Their leaders care not about the very people that they come from or allegedly represent. And we, the American people, we're very trusting, right? We haven't had to fight 2 wars on our continent. We haven't had to face many of the challenges, but that doesn't matter because the people that lead us only care about what's best for them and their family. And quite frankly, most of them are very short-term in thought process. Do you know what happens to traitors when they sell out their country and the new victors come in? What do you think happens? Historically, one of 2 things. They're completely ostracized or they're dealt with permanently. Because if you would sell out your own people, what prevents you from selling me out? Again, short-sighted, only worried about the next day. But these are the kinds of leaders that we've not only tolerated, we've encouraged. We've accepted that's the way the world is. Again, probably one of the reasons we ought to be mourning what we've already lost. But when that time for war comes, it won't be at our choosing. It won't be under our control. It's going to be here, and the question is, have you built up the resources? Have you built up yourself? Have you prepared yourself mentally for what's playing out in front of you? Now, I'm not suggesting that going and running around in the woods with patches on your clothing is going to make you any better. I'm not suggesting that just because you're a gym rat, you're prepared for what's coming. I suspect none of us really know what to expect or what is coming. But now might be the time to start looking into it. Now might be the time to build up your reserve and your resources. I don't want this. I sincerely hope I'm wrong and that we go another 30, 40, 50 years and nothing ever really happens. But does it really hurt to at least mentally prepare yourself for the possibility? I mean, Ecclesiastes has yet to have been disproven. Right now, if we're in a time for peace, that just denotes that there's going to be a time for war. And again, there are so many different ways that might play out. I'm merely suggesting that you give it some thought. You prepare yourself for the possibilities. Don't do anything rash. Don't do anything stupid. Choose your allies carefully. Trust the right people. And again, it is entirely possible that there are a lot of people that are just overly concerned about things they ought not be concerned about. I just don't think that's the case. The evidence suggests that more often than not, when the right people that you pay attention to are worried, you ought to be paying attention. Don't worry. There's nothing to be gained by worrying, but you should be paying attention. Because, as I said from the onset, there is a time for everything. An occasion for everything and a time for everything under heaven. What does the worker gain from his struggles? Well, I've had plenty of struggles. I'm looking to get a gain out of them right now. But the question is, what are you doing? Right? Ultimately, Brian McClanahan, who I have referenced many, many times, talks about thinking locally and acting locally. I've repeatedly admonished you, my dear listeners, think first about what's going on out your own back door. Think about your own family, your local community. Then worry about what's going on in your state. And then if you got all that under control, and there's absolutely nothing more you could be doing in those regards, then worry about what the feds are up to. Folks, there's a time for everything. What time is it for you? And with that, this has been According to Callus, and I We'll see you on the other side.
Canceled by the big tech mafia, but inadvertently profiting from owning their stocks in a mutual fund or ETF? At Two Pillars, they believe that censorship is a form of violence and a business practice that does not promote human flourishing. In many cases, through their investigative screening process, they can help you divest from companies that are denying your God-given, inalienable right to speak freely. Hey, Patriots, Two Pillars believes it's time for conservatives to align their values and investments. Two Pillars is your place for impact investing in the parallel economy. Find out what's in your investment portfolio with a complimentary portfolio review. Contact them today to learn more. Call toll-free at 833-377-0051 or send an email to info@twopillarsam.com. That's info@twopillarsam.com. Get started today. Advisory services are offered through Jacob & Boaz Asset Management, LLC, doing business as Two Pillars Asset Management or Two Pillars, a registered investment advisor in the states of Texas and California. Two Pillars is not endorsed by any government agency and is not engaged in the practice of law or tax advice.